Hi, this is former WWE superstar Al Snow, and you're watching So Says Shernoff. Say that about 5 times fast.
It's a little unorganized, but we're having fun here. It is good to have you here. I am Josh Shernoff, and we have got one hell of a show for you today. Joel Gertner is here, everybody. I'm also going to take a look at the performance art debate in wrestling, but first, I have an announcement to make. For months now, I've been calling on you, the fans, to encourage AEW to update this picture of Jerry Lynn on their website. Last month, I even went so far as to go to AEW All Out and find Jerry Lynn to show AEW that he actually has a face. Well, thanks to me and you and this show and absolutely nobody else, it finally happened. Yeah. AEW finally gave Jerry Lynn the photo he deserves. Hashtag this is Jerry Lynn. We did it, guys. We did it. This calls for a celebration, but what drink should I celebrate with?
A little bit of the bubbly.
Thanks, Chris. Cheers to a job well done, and now, headlines. Ric Flair. So apparently he is threatening legal action against the WWE over Becky Lynch's use of the name The Man. Or he was until he showed up on WWE TV again, so maybe this is a moot point. But I think the initial intent deserves at least a mention. I just don't understand. You're Ric Flair. No matter how big this nickname gets for Becky Lynch, this will never outshine your legacy. A lawsuit will, but her use of the Man, I mean, I could understand if someone was trying to use the nickname The Nature Boy. That's a different story. I mean, could you guys imagine if someone took a classic moniker like that from a revered legend in the business and tried to make it their own? Now that person would deserve to be sued, but moving on. We are just about a week away from AEW's debut on TNT, which will mark both the start of the Wednesday Night Wars and I think AEW's third debut show. This company has managed to make every single event feel like the first big show they've ever done, and I think that's awesome. But can they sustain this must-see feeling on a weekly episodic TV show? Well, time will tell. They are off to a pretty good start. Chris Jericho's little bit of the bubbly line is the most over thing in wrestling since, well, Chris Jericho's You Just Made the List. There's a common thread in there somewhere. But listen, we can't talk about the month's headlines without mentioning Chris Jericho's loss of the AEW belt. No, he didn't lose it in a match. He lost it in a limousine, which to me feels like AEW is already ripping off the WWE. That took you a second. No, Chris Jericho went to Longhorn Steakhouse and left the title in the limo. Apparently with the wrong luggage, and then the driver returned the wrong luggage and I guess left the belt on top of the trunk or something because it ended up on the side of the road where a gentleman named Frank Price, played here by Woody Harrelson, he found it. So he says he saw it in a velvet bag sitting in a turn lane. He said the bag seemed scuffed up, so he did what anyone who sees a random bag containing, quote, something heavy would do. He decided to pick it up and take it home. Upon arriving home, he looked in the bag and discovered a championship belt. His wife, the crack detective that she is, Googled the belt and somehow was able to figure out it was the AEW championship. How, I will never know. But The real question in all of this isn't how the belt ended up in the road. It isn't how Chris Jericho at this stage in his career with all of his fame and fortune is still eating at Longhorn Steakhouse. No, the question is, A, why did this guy stop and pick up a velvet bag in the road? And B, why did he not look in the bag until he got home? Who sees a bag on the side of the road and says, I should take this? Let alone sees a bag on the side of the road and says, I should take this, but not look inside until I've brought it into my house. Right? What if it was a snake in the bag? What if there was a severed limb in the bag? What if, God forbid, there was the 24/7 title in that bag? Could have been any number of things that you wouldn't want to bring into your house. While this story makes absolutely no sense, the important thing is that Chris Jericho was reunited with his championship gold, and that friend of the show, Dave Milliken, didn't have to figure out how to create a second belt in 6 weeks' time. Finally on headlines, it's official. WWE is doing a brand split. Again. And somehow I'm just as excited for it as I was the last time, which I'm pretty sure is the definition of insanity. With all the hubbub about WWE's move to Fox, there has been one very outspoken critic. ESPN anchor and guy who thought if he wore glasses, he wouldn't have to open his eyes to see, Keith Olbermann. He tweeted and unnecessarily knocked Braun Strowman's appearance on Fox Sports. So we dug through Keith's Twitter in an attempt to find something we could poke fun at. But all we saw were almost hourly pleas to save dogs from high kill shelters. So with that, I'm gonna say the good he's doing kind of outweighs the bad. So I'm not gonna lose my mind over this somewhat obnoxious dig at the WWE. After all, at least he didn't compare the greatest masked wrestler in a generation to Nacho Libre. We'll be right back.
You believe you see all there is to see in the world. You believe there's nothing hiding in the shadows. But I have seen the truth. And it's more wonderful and more terrifying than you could ever imagine.
Our main story tonight is about the categorization or definition of professional wrestling. For months, if not years, legendary professional wrestling manager and president of the Vince Russo fan club, Jim Cornette, has been a target of both wrestling fans and professional wrestlers. In turn, many up-and-coming pro wrestlers or performance artists, we'll get to that in a second, have been targeted by Mr. Cornette. The good news is that both sides have argued their opinion with class and respect. Just kidding. They have bickered like a bunch of children who learned to speak by watching old episodes of The Wire. Now, Jim Cornette is obviously very passionate about this business and his opinion. However, you cannot discount the passion of the opposing argument. These are men and women who are actively in the trenches. And I'm not going to waste time discussing who is right and who's wrong. What I'm going to do is lay out some facts and see if we can't come up with an opinion that everyone can agree on. In the 1990s, Vince McMahon decided to stray from the term professional wrestling and adopt the term sports entertainment. So let's break that down. The definition of sport is an activity involving physical exertion and skill in which an individual or team competes against another or others for entertainment. The definition of entertainment, the action of providing or being provided with amusement or enjoyment. So, the definition of sports entertainment would more or less be the definition of sport. The only hang-up is the section that mentions an individual or team competing against one another. But in a way, that's not altogether wrong. While the athletes in the ring aren't competing for a victory, they also kind of are. Their performance can dictate crowd reaction. It can influence the creative direction of their character, which can see very real professional and financial gain. Now, I just used the word performance because that is what they're doing. They are performing. So does that mean it's a performance art like Impact Wrestling star and woman who could literally break me in half with her quads, Jordynne Grace, would have you believe? Well, that's back to the dictionary. Performance art is defined as an art form that combines visual art with dramatic performance. Strictly working off that definition alone, I'm going to have to say professional wrestling is far more sport than performance art. The real issue in my mind comes down to the old carny term, kayfabe, which, because the name of the show is So Says Webster, is defined as the fact or convention of presenting stage performances as genuine or authentic. So, if you really break this all down, the argument isn't so much about fact as it is about semantics. Professional wrestling could be defined with really any of the definitions associated with sport, entertainment, and of course, kayfabe. As for performance art, I'm not really sold on that, but don't get me wrong, I understand the sentiment. I just think the term was used in an incorrect manner. For more on that, feel free to read the rest of the dictionary on your own time. So, I think there are a few things we can all agree on. Pro wrestling is athletic, a very real competition between athletes, just not in the win-or-loss kind of way. And it's also an entertaining performance the last 5 years of WWE TV aside. But I don't think any of that is the issue in the argument between Cornette and people like Jordynne Grace or Joey Ryan or even the Young Bucks. I think the core of the argument comes down to the level of exposure of the inner workings of the business. And for that, you have to feel for Jim Cornette. How do you think professional magicians felt when those True Secrets of Magic TV shows came out? This is something they have dedicated their lives to, something they have sworn to protect, and now they see it being flaunted out in the public eye. But here's the flip side to that. People like Joey Ryan and the Young Bucks aren't to blame. Whether it's the dick flip or the super kick party, these athletes tried something and it caught on with fans. I'm not sure that Joey Ryan would have had the same success in this industry had he gone by the gimmick, the Grappler Joe Ryan, the man with the most devastating half Nelson. This is a character-driven business. You need to find a way to stand out, and these athletes in question have done that. So, who is to blame here? Because we have to blame someone. Well, first, I don't know that we have to blame someone. Things change. Time moves on and the business evolves. But if I had to put blame on anyone, I think it would have to be a combination of the internet's favorite punching bag, Vince McMahon, and those doing the punching, the fans. First, Vince. He changed the perception of the business both to survive, but also for financial gain. The whole sports entertainment name came from his attempt to avoid heavy taxes from state athletic commissions. But again, on the other side, why should he have had to pay taxes as though it were a true sporting competition if we know it's more of a live action stunt show? The point I'm trying to illustrate with all of this is that there are more catch-22s than Glenn Jacobs has gimmicks. But the fans, they are to blame here. They have made a decision that knowing everything is more important than being entertained. But again, is that really a bad thing? I love watching documentaries on how films are made, seeing the big CGI fights taking place on a green screen. It's cool and interesting to me. The thing is, I don't let it ruin the finished movie for myself. Look, I can talk about this for hours and go around and around in circles. I can blame Vince. I can blame the fans. I can blame inside dirt sheet writers like Dave Meltzer, seen here in an episode of Hoarders at the lowest desk in the history of desks. I can blame Dave and others for trying to expose the business, but at the end of the day, everyone involved in the blame has an understandable reason for why they do what they do. I think there is really one solution, and I'm serious about this. I think there needs to be an agreed-upon divide, subgenres of sports entertainment. The same way you can separate pro wrestling from quote-unquote real sports, I think professional wrestling needs to be separated from, we'll call it performance wrestling. Let people go enjoy The Invisible Man. Let them go enjoy the 60-minute Broadway Catch-as-Catch-Can classic. Schindler's List and Freddy Got Fingered are both movies, but they are very much separated in their specific genres. There is absolutely no confusion that they are trying to be the same thing. Just like there should not be any confusion that Joey Ryan performing a dick flip on an opponent is trying to be Ric Flair and Ricky Steamboat. There is an understanding, and I think as soon as both sides can agree that they are in different genres, we may be able to finally end these childish and ultimately pointless Twitter wars. But I'm not sure this can happen because kayfabe is dead. Or is it? The same people who think they know everything is a work go crazy for vicious clotheslines that turns an athlete inside out. Well, guess what? Unless it came from one of these men, that clothesline was a work. You got worked, and to quote DDP, that's not a bad thing, that's a good thing. Why can't a promotion say, hey, we're going back to real competition and then just work the crowd the way they used to? Agree to protect that genre of the business and go have fun in the other genre. Kaiju Big Battle has been an accepted subgenre for decades. It would take time and work, but it could happen. And maybe it would be time better spent focusing on rebuilding kayfabe for one genre than focusing on trashing the other side of things. Look, this is a tough subject that deserves real thought and debate, and I hope I've given you all something to think about and debate with each other. I also hope that in time, the great entertainers of this new generation and the great minds of the previous generation can figure out how to coexist. In the meantime, Jim Cornette, stop wishing death on people. It's childish and it's hurtful and it invalidates your otherwise decent arguments. Oh, and speaking of death, I almost forgot. Ultra-violent deathmatch wrestling. That is garbage. We'll be right back.
You believe you see all there is to see in the world. You believe there's nothing hiding in the shadows. But I have seen the truth. And it's more wonderful and more terrifying than you could ever imagine.
Is an ECW legend. He's the host of the 69-minute Eargasm podcast and can be heard calling the action with yours truly at Go Professional Wrestling's Go Big or Go Home. Please welcome Joel Gertner. Thank you. Please have a seat.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here.
I'm bummed.
Why are you bummed?
I missed Calvin and I missed Magic.
Yes, that is true. We had for our live audience, Calvin Tan did some magic for them before the show started.
Big Magic.
Yeah, well, he's
I heard he's great. I heard I've seen fiddling around in the back even when he's not on stage. He's great.
We actually pay him to fiddle around in the back. That's his whole job.
I want you to know too, I'm listening. I heard everything you said in your performance art monologue.
Yes, what's your take?
Yet and still, let me just say this. Wrestling is a work, but magic is real.
Can we get that is well said and not surprising to from the cunning linguist, I believe you referred to yourself as once upon a time.
I wanted to come out here and do one of my sexually laced limericks.
I would be upset if you didn't.
But nothing rhymes with Shernoff. with the exception of the calories in bed that your mother and I burn off, or your sister finds me the 180-degree antithesis of a turn off, or if me and your girlfriend, what we did was called churning butter, we would never lose a churn off.
I am going to ask
Just
you
those.
not to talk about my girlfriend because my wife is watching.
I appreciate
So, thank you for that. And that's actually, you know, for me, growing up a huge wrestling fan and a fan of ECW, obviously growing up right outside of Philadelphia, that is, and some people in the audience might not realize, what an honor that is to actually have Joel Gertner perform one of those monologues, or how would you, a poem, really.
Yeah. A Gertnerism. It's
A Gertnerism,
called,
okay.
Yeah.
Was there ever a Gertnerism that you were obviously famous for doing this back in ECW? Was there ever a time that even in ECW you went too far? That Paul Heyman or somebody, I'm not talking about with the fans, because that was the fun of going too far with the fans. Anytime you walk back through the curtain and they're just like, oh, Joel, that was...
Some of them were long. I mean, they kept getting longer as time went by. Some of them were long. The Office never really cared so much about that. No, not really. Not with a Gertnerism. There was the time that we got a jeer from TV Guide Online's Cheers and Jeers for the John F. Kennedy Jr. Thing that
I think that counts.
Only aired in certain markets.
Yeah.
But that didn't rhyme. That was more, you know, Weekend Update meets, you know, Tim and Eric, you know, a good decade plus before Tim and, I mean, it was kind of out there. It was kind of extreme SNL, but that's what I was told to do. So
and that's again, and that's kind of what ECW was known for, was pushing that envelope, going further. And you know, there's that old saying that, you know, I know it's in acting and a lot of performance, that I'd rather have to pull you back than try to push you. And that, I think, is, it seems to me that that's kind of the motto you went by, if not those words exactly, when you would go out. Did you ever have one of your Gertnerisms that was your favorite?
It's kind of like choosing between children, because they're brain children. So it's tough for me to personally pick a favorite. I know there are ones that are repeated to me more often than others. There are ones that are the favorites of fans. And those, I guess, because it's always nice to know that people are listening, you know, those become favorites. So, you know, whether they're at home or here in Dayton, they're watching me and masturbating is one. and there's one that I did in California that has to do with certain bedroom activity. It's not for. It's probably not for public consumption.
Yeah,
but I mean, nobody should listen to it. Probably get an ear infection if you hear it too often.
Which brings us to the 69-minute Eargasm podcast.
Sir.
So can you tell us a little bit about that show, how it came to be? Walk us through a little bit of the format of what that is.
It came to be, I probably waited a year or two or more too long to have a podcast, and everybody had one, talkers and non-talkers alike. And I thought that since I happened to be the number 49 greatest talker in the history of professional wrestling, as voted, thank you, by WWE.com. Which is not bad, considering I've only done like one episode of their TV, right? I've done like one pay-per-view, so I'm actually, in a way, kind of happy that I made kind of the bottom of that list. Right. But it's good to be in good company. And I figured, hey, if I'm a talker, I should be talking. Yeah. So I have this podcast that's ramping up now. We've been doing it every few weeks. We're going to start to put one out every week or so. Every week is the goal. And just some really cool food for thought and some kind of upper level analytics and just really, really making some brain sport out of pro wrestling. And I had Disco Inferno on this past week. It's on now, the current episode. A few episodes ago, I had Mark Madden on, and I'm thinking about those because those are very similar episodes to each other, not just because of WCW, but just also talking about the business, past, present, future, and just a lot of the kind of similar trajectories those interviews went on. But gosh, I've been blessed. I've had MVP on, and I've had this year's Valentine's Day episode was Priscilla Kelly and Darby Allin.
Oh, wow.
And then Katie Forbes and Rob Van Dam. So that was a cool Valentine's Day episode. We've had Judah Friedlander on, and earlier today, Offset, not as part of the show, but I've heard you talk about some of our favorite people. I heard you mention Taylor Williamson.
Yes.
I heard you mention Bill Apter.
Yes.
And actually, the 2 episodes prior to the current one, Disco Inferno, one was with Taylor Williamson and one was with Bill Apter. We have just, to qualify to be a guest, you've got to really be a great person that's had some great things to do with this great business of professional wrestling.
So I'll be on there soon then.
Very soon.
You're a talker. Is one podcast enough for you, or are you going to do more? There are people, I mean, everybody knows you got Conrad Thompson, does 165 podcasts, it's and counting. And
it's because he does so many. And it's because I always keep waiting for mine that is in development with him. I always keep waiting for after StarCast, because I don't want to bother him, and he's already bombarded. So I figure after StarCast, but as we've seen from 1 into 2 into 3 and now 4, there is no after StarCast, because after StarCast just means in a day or two it's going to be before StarCast.
Yes.
So because of that, it's been 2 years that we're in development. 1 year, 2 years we were in discussion. 1 year it's been in development, and then finally last month we did the pilot that we've put in front of Conrad for him to give a listen to.
Okay.
And so we're in the feedback stage and we're waiting, and we're going to take the next step with that. But I kind of only like to speak with Conrad about one thing at a time-ish. It's not necessarily that, but it is that I really don't like to bombard him, because he's got a lot going on.
Yeah, he is a busy guy, but a great guy, and we've both had the pleasure of working with him. I want to go back in time a little bit. You were best known as the ring announcer for the Dudley Boys. How did that come to be? And do you have any stories about the Dudley Boys that you can share?
So I'll go back to the first part of it first. How me being the Dudley's ring announcer. So I started off as a timekeeper and ring announcer, a timekeeper backup ring announcer, full-time primary ring announcer. And then when Bob Ortiz, who I was substituting for, came back from a hiatus, I got moved sideways. I was blessed that for whatever reason, I got moved sideways. Every time I got moved sideways, it was a move forward. It was a move upward. But it didn't necessarily, not to say that I, wasn't being given promotions based on my merit, because I was effectively, so it didn't matter, right? It doesn't matter if a step forward was meant at that moment to be a step forward or a step sideways, but...
Take that step forward. If it's there for you, take it, absolutely.
Listen, if there's a seat on the rocket ship, go, right?
Absolutely.
So the thing is, so I get moved when Bob comes back, and I had already been a foreign language ring announcer, Spanish and Japanese for some of the Lucha guys.
Okay.
So I've been a foreign language ring announcer and the ring announcer, and now I get moved sideways, so I get moved into being a heel ring announcer. Now I bounce around kind of from different act to different act, different stable, different faction, different team. And eventually I get put with Axel and Devon. I think Devon, turned on him, and I wind up with the heel Dudleys. And, having Spike as an adversary and taking the moonsault from Big Dick Dudley. And so I wind up with the Dudleys. So that's how I became the ring announcer, kind of valet, personal spokesperson for the Dudleys. Stories, I don't know, man. Every day at work was a story. I mean, I can't. I'd be doing the rest of them an injustice to pick one, To be able to, it's one thing to say that you were a part of ECW, but to be able to be a part of ECW with a team that went on to be, they're Hall of Famers, they're recognized as possibly one of the greatest tag teams of all time, definitely in the argument. What did it feel like for you when you found out that they were going to the WWE? Did you look at that and say, A, was there ever a conversation of you going with them? And B, did you, when you realized you weren't going with them,
did you look at that and say, okay, hey, this is great. This is time for me to write that next chapter? Or did you look at that and say, what am I going to do? I'm the guy who, with the Dudley Boys. What was that like for you?
I was proud for them. As it related to me, everything happened at the same time in '99, at the same time, kind of in the middle of the year as it was happening. They were getting ready to leave and go to the WWF at the time. And I was getting promoted to be the co-host of the TNN show. Our flagship TV show had never had a co-host. It was just Joey.
Yeah.
So this was going to be me as the co-host with Joey and doing color. And, you know, one way of looking at it is hindsight is 20/20, but there's regret in that. And there's nothing to regret. I prefer to look at it not as hindsight is 20/20, but I prefer to look at it as you got to have blind faith. You know, when you jump in, you do it with a blindfold on, and you just kind of, the same way what's on screen is episodic, is the same way while art's imitating life's imitating its art, imitating life behind the scenes. That's all episodic too. Your life is a soap opera. And to go back and try to think about it now, and was there talk of me going with them? I know that before I had signed the contract, Bubba and Devon, I don't know if it was a 100% full-fledged, was I invited to go with them, or at that stage, because maybe this would come first, was it more along the lines of, are you sure you want to sign the contract? And then if I would have said, yeah, because if I wouldn't have signed, then I would have been available to go with them. And I might have said, well, I do intend on, so to go back 20 years, let's call it, and it is exactly, it is 20 years. Yeah. To go back 20 years and try to put the jigsaw puzzle together, you know, I don't know. I had spoken with the WWF once about going before the Dudleys went.
Really?
And when ECW, in the last days of ECW, I had heard that there might have been interest from WCW, but as we all know, WCW and ECW kind of
just around the same
ended
time,
at the same time. So was there legitimate, substantial, worthwhile, viable opportunity for me to go to a company other than ECW? Between 2 or 3 different times, and between those 4 adjectives, probably.
Okay.
But it didn't happen. And again, rather than look at that with any kind of regret or hindsight's 20/20 or saying anything like that, look, a few days ago I turned 44, and I'm not in there doing a tope con giro. Yeah, right. I'm not doing, you know what I mean? I'm not.
You could if you wanted
and
to.
I could, and if he's in the video game, if you unlock,
right.
Yeah, you could. But that's not who I am.
Right.
So I think you know, maybe I'm in maybe I'm not even yet in my prime, because look, if somebody that I might come after on today's television in the future, and crazier things have happened or been said, is Paul Heyman. Well, you know, Paul's 54, God bless him, and I'm 44, and I've known him for going on a quarter of a century, and even though time only moves in one direction, and where did the time go? Yeah. Still, I've always been 10 years his junior. And when you're somebody like he is, somebody like I am, somebody like you are, and you can be in your prime, look at a Mike Adamle, so you can be in your prime when you're in your 40s, your 50s, your 60s. Yeah. So the fact that, you know, anything that hasn't happened yet, just gonna keep plugging away.
Yeah, I think it's, all that's very well said, and I think the best way to look at things, you're unquestionably a legend in the wrestling business, and it might not be something that you see yourself as.
Number 49. No,
number 49. Yeah, right. Yeah, that's true. You could have been 51, and then
nobody, and then we wouldn't have known.
Right. I think that, you know, your story is still just getting started. The way that you're putting that, it makes a lot of sense. Wrestling is at, this is one of the best times certainly in the last 20 years to be in this business. Best time to be a fan, best time to be a wrestler, best time to be a personality. And I think that, you know, you have the right mindset, you're open to these things, and above all else, you have the talent. So, and that's, you know, and you know people. And, you know, I always say who you know can get you somewhere, and what you know and how good you are at it, that's what keeps you there. And I think, you know, you've stood the test of time. Before I let you go, I just want to say, so we worked together in 2002. I was running a independent wrestling company, and I hired you to do commentary along with Sassy Mike Malassi, who I will say, Sassy Mike Malassi was basically if you took Joel Gertner and the Blue Meanie and you mixed them together, that was Sassy Mike Malassi. That's basically...
That's like nitrogen and glycerin.
Yeah,
that's
I mean,
dangerous.
it was... Yeah.
Meanie's a great friend of mine. I don't think you'd want to mix the two of us together.
But 2002 was not the first time you and I met. And I don't expect you to remember this, but we mentioned Bill Apter earlier. I've known Bill my whole life. I went backstage with him to help when he was taking pictures for the magazines 20 years ago at Hardcore Heaven 99, Poughkeepsie, New York. And I was in the stairwell, and I bumped into a young Joel Gertner right in the middle of his fame in ECW. And we have a picture. Can we bring that picture up? And that is us. I don't remember the exact date, but that is the summer of 1999. I'm wearing the baggiest shirt that I think, or my arms just hadn't filled in yet. And you are looking not a day over 12 in that photo as well. How old were you? So you're 40. So you were 24 years old.
I just turned 44 this week,
right?
A few days ago. So
you were 23 at the time, and all of and it's amazing. And I was 15. I turned 16, September 28th. I'll be 36. I can say my age because people can do math. So, you know, the way we're talking about this. If someone had given me a birthday present in 1999 and said, your birthday present is you get to call wrestling matches with Joel Gertner, that would have been a mind-blowing birthday present for me. This year on my birthday,
forward. Yeah, man, let's make it happen.
This year on my birthday, you and I will be calling the matches for Go Pro Wrestling's Go Big or Go Home event. And it's not a popular thing to admit in the wrestling business that you mark out over something, that you're still a fan. But I have always been a fan of yours. I continue to be a fan of yours. I'm excited to work with you, and I'm honored to have you.
I told The Office, GoPro, the other day. I told them that I wanted to do notes and research, and I asked them to send me the lineup and stuff. Yeah. And they did, but I don't know, jokingly, but I just thought I'd share it with you on television that this is probably sharing too much. And I asked so I could do notes and research, and they go, Josh is a pro man. Josh is going to lead it. Don't worry about that. They said all you need to do is do color and tear up Josh.
Wow. All right. And that's what you have to look forward to.
So it might not be the JFK Jr. promo, but now that's what I've been tasked with.
I look forward to being torn up by you there. I could have worded that better. I look forward to working with you. Thank you so.
Torn up. I didn't talk about magic. Don't you want to know about my favorite magic? I told you I was a fan of magic.
Yeah, okay.
My favorite magic trick?
Please.
When I split your girlfriend in half.
All right, there we are. Joel Gertner, everybody. Thank you, Joel Gertner. We'll be right back.
You believe you see all there is to see in the world. You believe there's nothing hiding in the shadows. But I have seen the truth. And it's more wonderful and more terrifying than you could ever imagine.
That's our show. Thank you again to Joel Gertner for being here. Thank you all for coming out and tuning in. Make sure to follow me on social media at So Says Shernoff and at Shernoff Show. Please subscribe to our YouTube page at youtube.com/So Says Shernoff. And join us next month for a special Halloween-themed episode. This has been So Says Shernoff, because that is what Shernoff had to say. Good night, everybody.